Thank you for coming to the Awaken Life podcast. I'm your host, Scott Landis. How can you live an absolutely fulfilling and purpose-filled life, maintain a passionate, intimate relationship, all while raising kids and growing multiple streams of income? That's the big question we seek to answer on this podcast by interviewing people who are already doing it. One thing we know for sure is it takes a community to do it well. So thank you for being a part of the Awaken Life community. I'm looking forward to growing with you, and on to the episode. Welcome to the Awaken Life podcast with Scott Landis, and today my guest is Lieutenant Oakland McCulloch. In his 23-year career in the Army, he has held numerous leadership positions in the Infantry and Armor branches. Since retiring from the Army in 2009, he's gone on to do many other impressive things, proving the power of his leadership abilities. He is a nationally recognized keynote speaker and the author of Your Leadership Legacy, Becoming the Leader You Were Meant to Be, based on his over 40 years of leadership experience, with 23 of those being as a combat arms officer in the United States Army. As a speaker and author, Oak highlights principles that will benefit today's leaders and inspire the leaders of tomorrow in any profession and at any level of leadership. Oak is married to Kelly. They have two children. They have grandchildren, two grandsons. They have a granddaughter, and they're currently out of Daytona, Florida. Lieutenant Oakland McCulloch, welcome to the Awaken Life podcast. Thanks so much for being here.
Yeah, well, thanks, Scott. Thanks for having me on the show. I've been looking forward to it.
Yeah, me too. We had to reschedule this because I had a family emergency travel, and I appreciate your flexibility. And both times we scheduled it for, you're in East Coast, I'm on Pacific time, and this is my first time doing a 6 a.m. podcast recording. And I did that because I'm like, okay, I'm talking to a 23-year veteran in the Army. I better be up and ready, have my bed made. I mean, I felt the pressure that I needed to do this. So, anyway, so I'm glad we're finally
It's funny
here.
because I tell people all the time, I set my alarm clock. In too many years in the Army and working on farms, I can't sleep in. I set my alarm clock every morning for 5 o'clock. It never goes off, ever. I was up this morning at 4:45, that's just the way it is. I'm always up early.
Yeah, I hear you. All right. Well, fill in the gap. So you have a very impressive career. I obviously left a lot out of your bio, so we could talk about it. And but start with how did life begin? Go back to the early ages before Army. What brought you to that place?
Right. So I kind of been a leader in just about everything I did. I don't know what caused me to want to do that or led me to that, I guess, at a young age. But I was always captain of my baseball, basketball, football team. I was student government president. I was class president. So that was always something I did, and I enjoyed it. And then I graduated from high school, went off to the United States Military Academy at West Point for a couple of years, played baseball there, had some leadership positions, left there, finished up in Army ROTC. I was the battalion commander for the ROTC program, so I had some leadership positions there. And then I came in the Army, did 23 years in the Army, led lots of different organizations of different sizes and different specialties, and then retired from the Army, ran a food bank for a couple of years. I ran the day-to-day operation of a food bank that covered 52 counties along the Gulf Coast, from Mississippi all the way into the panhandle of Florida. And I took over that job about a month before the BP oil spill in the Gulf. So we were a little busy during those 2 years. And then now I'm a government service officer. I have some leadership responsibilities here in the job I have, and love being a leader. I always tell people, good leaders want to always lead. I want to be the leader all the time. Now, I know when I go home at night and I go in my house, I know I'm not the leader anymore. Okay. I got it. There's a reason I've been happily married for 36 years. I know my place, but I always want to be the leader. I think good leaders want to lead.
Yeah, that's cool. So you touched on something, I know that a little tongue in cheek, but let's talk about leadership in the home just for a second. So 36 years of marriage, you could be the top of the list on who I've had on the podcast as far as length of marriage time. So there's definitely wisdom I don't want to pass by there. Besides the humility that you share in your position with your wife, what else? What are your other great tips as far as having a successful marriage for 36 years?
Yeah, I get asked that a lot from the young men and women that I help graduate from ROTC and go out there as lieutenants. A lot of them getting married right out of college. And I get asked a lot, so what's the secrets? And I said, there are really no secrets, but the things that you got to do, the things you have to do aren't hard. Doing them is the hard part. I said, number one, always be careful what you say. Because once you say it, it's out there. You can't take it back. And so make sure you know what you want to say before you say it. And don't make sure you're not hurting the other person's feelings. It doesn't mean you don't be honest, because I believe honesty is absolutely a policy. My wife and I believe 100% that if I'm doing something that bugs her, she tells me. If she does something that bugs me, I tell her, and then we kind of work together. And I think that's the other key is it is work. It isn't something that just happens. You have to work together. You got to care about each other. You have to take care of each other, because there's times when I kind of carry her, and there's many times that she's carried me, and that's part of it, the give and take. You got to really respect and trust and take care of your partner. And if you do that, I think you got a shot.
Now, she was in the Army for a while, but you met before that, is that right? Or is that how you met?
We met in ROTC at Northern Illinois University. So we were in ROTC for 2 years together. So, and didn't even date while we were in ROTC. I always thought I wanted to date her, but anytime that I didn't have a girlfriend, she had a boyfriend, and when she didn't have a boyfriend, I had a girlfriend. So we just never dated in ROTC. We dated 2 weeks after she graduated, because she graduated 6 months before I did. So we dated 2 weeks after she graduated, and that was the 14th of May, and went out on a dinner date and went back. I think we may have even seen a movie that night, but we went back and we sat on the sofa for till about 2 o'clock in the morning talking. And when I walked out of there, I knew I was going to marry her. That was in my mind. And that was 14 May. We were engaged on the 2nd of July, and we were married on the 17th of January. Wow. And that was 36 and a half years ago. So
that's how it's done, kids. Yeah.
Well, but people are amazed by that, but we knew each other for 2 years. So, I mean, it wasn't like we started from scratch. She knew who I was. I knew who she was. We saw each other every day for 2 years at PT and class, lab, and around campus. So, I mean, we did know who each other were. So it wasn't like we started from scratch.
Absolutely. Yeah. So there was a friendship, there was there was the proximity that you guys had, you were able to observe each other in your natural habitat, and but then get to know each other, have that time on the couch, which I think if you walked out of there with that clarity, you had a deep conversation, you were checking the boxes, and you just knew. And then once that's there, just like, the engagement, what was that, 2 months later, and then married less than a year later. Contrast that to what the conventional wisdom of today is like, swipe left and right for 20 years. And then, it's just ridiculous these days. Go back to that. Like, thank you for your example. And I want my kids, I've got a 19, 15 and 12-year-old. So I want them to pay attention. I remember those days. Do that. Yeah, totally.
Now, and I tell people all the time, look, the only thing better than being a father, and I love being a father, and I've got a son and a daughter. 34 and 32. So a little bit ahead of you.
Sure.
And then I got my 9-year-old granddaughter and my 6-year-old grandson and my 2.5-year-old grandson. And
Nice.
we have the 9-year-old and the 6-year-old with us. So we usually get them for the month of July. So they're here this
Oh,
month.
wow.
And
That's awesome.
and love having them with us, and hopefully can pass on, hopefully my children are passing on some of the lessons I gave them, but my wife and I take an opportunity to pass on some lessons to our grandkids, and I think that's important as a grandfather, certainly important as a parent. Parents who think that they're not the most important thing and in the raising of their children are sadly mistaken, because they are.
Mm-hmm. Yes. Wow. Thank you for sharing some of your personal details. And I want to get into your message. And when we first met, you were saying, "Hey, I just want to get my message out there." I made note of that. And now I'm excited to get your message out there because, and I want, if you can, bring in like the current state of our world and our society in contrast to what your life has been, just with what you've shared so far. I'm on a mission here at Awaken Life to be a catalyst for, I think it's the family, right? And if you really want to go all the way to the core, it's fathers, it's good fathers, it's good, strong men. But
Yes.
the strong family in the lack of those two things is the issue of everything that we see going. You're just like, what? Scratching your head, like, what the heck is going on in the world today?
I ask that question every time, every day.
Right? Every day you wake up and there's a new, like, what the heck headline. And, you can't make this stuff up. It's just getting so ridiculous. Nothing can surprise you anymore. But yeah, I want your message out there also. And I think we're on the same team as far as that goes. That what you have demonstrated in your life and what your message is what the world needs to hear. So let's get into it. Where do you want to start?
So I think, well, you kind of touched on it, that society today is not the one that I grew up in, and probably not even the one that you grew up in, even though you're a few years younger than me. But I think where we've gotten to this point is a couple things. One, I think fathers, there's so many families out there that don't have a father figure. And mothers are great, but mothers can't be fathers. They just can't, especially for young men. Young men need to have that role model, that person who teaches them what good young men who become productive members of society and good citizens looks like. And I think that is something that we're really missing in our society right now. But with society kind of downplaying the importance of masculinity, because I hate that term, toxic masculinity. Masculinity is not toxic. People may be, but women can be toxic. I mean, come on, that's just absolute silliness. We need masculine men in our society that pass that on, that teach young men how to treat women, how to be good citizens. And I think we're lacking that right now in this society, and it's showing. It really is.
Yeah. I consider myself lucky, blessed. My 19-year-old son, he has got it. He is countercultural, as well as a lot of his buddies. I see hope in this generation coming out. Yeah,
there is. But we have to foster that, and we have to encourage it, and we have to stand up for the things that we believe in. I just had this conversation. I was in New York, as I was telling you, at an event. I was speaking at an event in New York City, and it was a great event. But I was having this conversation with somebody at the table that I was sitting at. We were talking about this very thing, and I said, because he asked me, he said, "So what do we do to bring we're so divided. What do we do to bring the country back together? And I said, we're not as divided as you think we are. I said, 90% of Americans are center left, center right. It might be a little bit left, a little bit right, whatever, whichever way you fall, but they're basically center. It's that 5% on the far left and that's 5% on the far right that their voice is the ones being heard. They're the loudest. And we, that 90% center left, center right, have to stand up and say, okay, enough is enough. Let's get back to talking about things that are sane and that and trying to come to an agreement on where we want to go. Because I don't think we're that far off if the silent majority, and it is by far the majority, stand up and say that we demand that we start figuring out a way forward that makes sense for everybody, not just those 10%, the 5% on each side.
Man, that's such a good point. I think that I'm seeing two things. You mentioned that silent majority needs to not be so silent, need to speak up, need to stand up, need to take a leadership role. But I also see there's a complete seeming ignorance or just unaware. My brand, Awakened Life. I'm on a mission to wake people up. It's not woke. I'm not talking about woke. It's anti-woke. But I want to wake these leaders up. What are your thoughts on that?
Yeah, I think we have to. I think we have to get back to, I'm adamant that I am not a party person, political party. I vote. I try to vote for who I think is the best candidate. And part of that being the best candidate for me is character and integrity and work ethic. And what do you really care about? The issues that you care about. And I think we have to get back to doing that. These people on Republican and Democrat, either both sides, who just party line no matter what, that's part of what got us where we are today. I think we got to get back to looking at voting for and holding, not only once we vote for them, but then hold them accountable for what they do. And we have lost that in this country. We elect people and then they do whatever they want, and there's no responsibility. There's no accountability for what they did. Because they're our candidate, they're our Republican candidate or Democratic candidate. We're going to vote for them one way or the other. And that's why we are in the position we are in.
Wow, that is huge. And I love how you started with, we're not as divided as, a lot of people think. That's a great premise. Yeah. And, whatever you call yourself politically, there's that most of us are in the center. And I think most of us want high character, high integrity, high work ethic, and then you keyed on a point, hold them accountable. That's the leadership quality that we, the people, need to have with the politicians and the people in government. Those people are supposed to work for us. Therefore, we're the leadership role in this government people setup, and that's not been happening. So poor leadership, I'm just thinking out loud here as you're speaking. I'm like, oh, light bulbs are going on. Poor leadership by we the people has been the problem. If we take responsibility for that, right? We can be victims. We can say, oh, the government's messing with us. But if we recognize, hey, we need to step up. We need to listen to Oak here and learn how to be a leader as a group of people. We could, if we step up, if leaders step up and hold accountable the people that are supposed to be working for us, that might help. So any thoughts on that?
Yeah, I think that's exactly what we got to do. I read an article the other day, and I'm Catholic, and somebody was making the point, there are 77 million Catholics in the United States. If we, as our Catholic religion, would vote what we're being taught, we would be the majority bloc. We could change makeup of Congress, of the president, of local politics. So I think, and the reason I bring that up is because I think everybody's kind of in a group that they could say, if in our community, if we decided what we wanted, we could make a difference. And that's where it starts. Because I got asked, I don't know, about a month ago, somebody said, I was given a presentation and I was talking about how we got to take accountability. We got to take responsibility for making a difference in this world. And I said, there's two things that you have to do. I said, number one, it starts at your local community. Because they said, so how do I do that? How do I make a difference in the United States? I said, you do what you can do, which means starts in your neighborhood, in your family, in your neighborhood, in your community, and start holding people accountable, start living the way, setting the example for the future generation of leaders that are going to come up, the future generation of kids that we're producing, because that we are going to sow, we're going to reap what we sowed. And if we don't do a good job, it's our fault. We're the ones responsible for developing that next generation. If we don't do a good job, it's going to be our fault. So you got to do that. You got to start where you can start. And I think if you do that, then you start making a difference. And that's where it starts, is in the local area. Because again, you can only do what you can do. I can't make, besides my vote for the senator or representative, that's the only way I can impact the national level, really. But I can impact my community much more by getting out there and doing those things, holding people accountable. And the other piece that I always tell to kind of make that point about doing what you can do is I encourage everybody. And again, in the Catholic Church, we talk about a holy moment. And for us, that's, you go out every day, you find one person and you make a positive difference in that person's life. One person. Imagine if everybody in your community, everybody in this nation went out every day, found one person and made a positive impact on them. What's the difference that we would be? I mean, that would be huge, and you can do that. That's very simple. Find one person, do one positive thing.
I love that. So the first one is start where you can start. I like that. It could be your family. Like what in your home have you been letting slide? Have you not taken responsibility for? Have you not held accountable to a high standard? Again, we're talking about high character, high integrity, high work ethic, and then hold yourself. Start with yourself, right?
Absolutely.
Hold yourself accountable. And then look in your, if you're, okay, so let's take the household. If you're not satisfied with the level of what's going on in the household, first take a look inside. Like, are you at the highest level you can? And, this is definitely speaking my language. I use tools and systems and processes to help people that are wanting to do that. Like, that's what I do for a living. And then from there, if you're not taking care of yourself, if you're not holding yourself to a high standard, then you can't really expect the people in your family to. But once you check that, the best you can, right? We're not perfect, but then you can start holding others accountable. And then from there, go to your community, whatever that is for you. Part of my community is this broadcast that we're doing here.
Right. And that's huge. I mean, because this is how we make a difference.
Sure.
Getting messages out there that people can understand. It's simple. I mean, I'm just a dumb farm boy. Things are simple for me. You got to keep it simple. And I think it can be simple. We try to complicate things too much. This is very simple. Like you said, it starts at home. Starts with you, starts in your home. If you're not happy with what's going on in your home, change it. You have that power as a parent, and then you move it from there out. And my father and my father had a huge impact on my life. Some good, some bad, and that's okay. Like you said, nobody's perfect. I keep trying to convince my wife I am, but she's not buying it. You'd think after 36 years I could convince her, but no, I can't.
Keep working on that. You got it.
Yeah, I know it. I'm still trying. But so he taught me two things at an early age. He said, number one, he said, if that in the integrity, you can never give nobody can ever take your integrity from you. You have to give it away. And he said, and that is one of the most important things you have as a man. Protect it with everything you have. And then and I absolutely believe that. And then the second thing that he taught me that I still live by is he said, if you say one thing and you do another, then it is your actions that will be believed, not what you say. And so set the example. And that's a huge part of my leadership. What I believe in leadership is that, to begin with, if you really want to be a leader, you have to have integrity, you have to have character, and you have to set the example for people. And the piece that we're talking about here, you got to care for people. That's a huge responsibility as a leader at every level, family level, community, national level, international level. I think if we get back to those kinds of things, I think we got a shot.
Man, so good. I'm getting a message that says the internet's unstable. Hopefully it's okay. Let me know if we get a delay here. Okay, so you said one of the things your father said was your actions will be believed over what you say. And I made another connection, in our Instagram culture.
There you go.
Okay. Thanks for hanging out while something goes on my side here.
No,
all right.
All right.
That seems that we are still broadcasting. So this is good. All right.
Good.
It's a little snafu. All right. Seems like all systems are go. It's a recording. We're still on Facebook. Yeah, it's still going. Wow. Setback. All right. So where did I cut out?
We were talking about what my father said about actions will be believed over words.
Okay, yes. And then today, Instagram didn't exist when your father was telling you that, but with our, your actions will be believed over what you present to the world, I think, as well. Because we have this mask, we have this false sense of reality with the influencer culture, how many likes I have, how many followers I have is so an identity statement today. And if we which is all a facade, right? You could, yeah. So go ahead. I mean, what thoughts do you have on that?
So I always tell young people, same thing I told my children. And of course they didn't have phones until they were well into high school. I think senior year in high school, we finally got them a phone. And of course, even then they didn't have what they have today. I mean, and I think that sure. That's part of the problem is at a young age, young men and women have access to things that they shouldn't have access to. Because let's face it, this technology is a double-edged sword. It's great. Mm-hmm. We wouldn't be doing this if it wasn't for this technology. There's lots of things that we don't have, we would not have in this world today if it wasn't for the technology that we have. But there's also lots of things in this world that are pretty evil because of that technology. Mm-hmm. And so you got to really emphasize to young men and women the importance of being very careful. Two things. One, whatever you put out there is out there forever. You may be able to delete it. It's not deleted. It's out there. Somebody can find it if they want to. So you got to be very careful what you put out there and really think about what you're going to say, because a lot of people get brave on social media. They'll say things on social media that they would never say to your face. And that's a problem. And here's one of the ways, again, my father told me at a young age, he said, son, life is about decisions and consequences. Every decision you make has a consequence, some good, some bad. And you need to get to the point in your life where you're making decisions that give you good consequences. Until you get to that point, life's going to be pretty tough. He said, and I'm going to help you how to figure that out. He said, this is what I'm going to tell you. Every time you're about to make a decision, think to yourself, would you want your mother to know that you're about to do that? If the answer is yes, that's probably a pretty good decision. Go ahead and do that. If the answer is no, you probably need to rethink that decision. Mm-hmm. And I pass that on. I pass it on to my kids. I pass it on to the young men and women I work with, because every day they're making decisions on social media that are going to impact them somewhere down the road, one way or the other, good or bad. And so they got to make sure that they're doing it right. So I think that's huge right now. We got to make sure that the youth understand that is something that is going to have an influence. Because I've been told by plenty of people who hire people that one of the first things they do is they pull up their social media sites and start looking and what they've posted and all.
Yeah.
I mean, that's a huge part of your resume, whether you believe it or not.
Yeah, good stuff. Okay, so it's two things you mentioned before. Start with your community, and then you said the second one is find one person and make a positive impact, and then you mentioned again care for people. So let's go into that. How does a good leader think about making that positive impact per day, and in the caring for people? Because I think, along with that idea of that kind of misconception about toxic masculinity that you pointed out, there are toxic people. Not masculinity isn't toxic, but they're toxic people, and their leadership isn't bad, but there are bad leaders, right? So help distinguish that. When you're a good quality leader, you are making a positive impact on people. So what's your thoughts on that? So
I tell people, if you want to be a good leader, and in my opinion, good leaders are servant leaders. That it's not about you; it's about the people that you have the privilege to lead, and it is a privilege to lead people. And so I say, and in that it's about people, and anytime it's about people, it's got to be about trust. People are not going to follow you if they don't trust you, and one of the ways to earn that trust is to take care of them. And one of the an easy way to start building that trust is to get to know them. And I know you got to have the leader-led relationship. And I'm not saying that you don't keep that, you should, but that doesn't mean you can't get to know that person personally, that you have the privilege to lead. And I've had some great leaders who kind of taught me that it's important to know the people. And here's why, because if I'm leading I'm leading a group of people and I have a job that needs to get done, if I know the strengths and weaknesses of all the people in my group, then I can assign those tasks and jobs to people who have that strength. If you don't get to know people, then that's something you don't have the capability to do. And I say there's a couple ways to get to know people and that you have the privilege to lead. Number one, get out from behind your desk, get out of your office, go out there where they are and talk to them where they work. Yeah, I give the example. If you call somebody into your office and you ask them a question, I promise you will get a different answer than if you went down where they were working and asked them that same question. Because when they come to your office, it's like going to the principal's office. They're wondering what they did, what kind of trouble they're in. Go out there and talk to them. A couple other ways to do it. I tell people, go out every day on purpose. Go out and find one person in your organization and find out one new thing about that person every day. One person. And not about work, their personal life. What's their spouse's name? What's their kids' names? What sports do their kids play? How old are they? What hobbies do they have? I mean, something personal. One person every day, learn something new about them. And a good way to do that, I had a boss who retired a 3-star general, and he said, never, ever turn down a chance to go get your own cup of coffee. He said 2 things when you do that. Number one, you show everybody who works for you that you are no better than they are. You have to go out and get your own cup of coffee just like they do. Nobody's bringing it to you. He said, and number 2, if you're lucky, there's 2 or 3 different ways to get to the coffee pot and back to your office. And you go a different way every time, and you stop and talk to people along the way. You will see the trust to start to grow.
That's really good. I love that. Never turn down a chance to get your own cup of coffee. There's a book title for a future book for you.
Isn't it?
Awesome. So I'm curious. So back to the marriage. So young, again, I have a 19-year-old son, so I'm always thinking through his perspective. He would love to be married, following your footsteps. He wants to, not wait around and just, get to it. And then I think about couples in their 20s, young couples, or some single man or woman who's looking to get married. When it comes to the things that you just went through, how do they apply in that relationship?
So I think that one of the mistakes I think young people make in marriage is that they lose track of actually spending quality time with each other. And I got it. I used to have 4-star generals who would get up on stage and talk to a group, and I'd be in the audience, and they'd start with, "You got to have work-life balance." And I said, "Yeah, right. That's how you made 4 stars. Let's be honest. That for a lot of people, that isn't possible. But what is possible, and what I tell people is, like with my job, I was deployed, I was on field training exercises, I was at the range, whatever. I had lots of times when I was away from home, and I had no choice about that. That was my profession. That was my career. That was my job. I had to go, had to do those things. So if you have a job like that, then when you do have downtime, you have to take advantage of it. And one of the things that my wife and I always did, and I got to give her credit for it, we moved about every 2 years, all over the country, all over the world. And every time we got ready to move, when we found out where we were going, she would sit down and she would come up with a list of, okay, here are the things we got to do while we're in that part of the country.
Oh,
and
cool.
the first weekend we had off, we'd pull out that list and we'd go do something as a family. And so I think that's important. And then I just think, even beyond doing stuff like that, just quality time of this sitting and spending time together. It doesn't mean you have to be talking the entire time. Doesn't mean you have to be whatever, just time together where it's just the two of you before you have kids, just the two of you sitting around. And then once you have your kids, I think it's important to have family time as well. And for us, it was dinner. When I was home, dinner was our family time, and there was no phones, there was no distractions, and we sat at the table and everybody talked. And I think we have gotten away from that. As I go around and I see it, especially out at restaurants, you go and here's 4 people and a parent and 2 kids, and all 4 of them are on the phone, texting, scrolling, instead of talking to each other. I think we've got to get back to that. I think the quality time in a family, both for the parents individually and for the family, is important.
Yeah. I love the tip, the example from your wife. When you live a lifestyle where you're going to be at a place for just a couple of years, there's maybe a sense of urgency about, we've got to do these things. We only have so many weekends in this time to go do these things. But I think majority of us, we don't have that sense of urgency. But what if we did, because we don't know how much time we have. But if you lived your life in the place where you're at, where you happen to be at, with the idea like you're on vacation, or you've only got a couple of weeks, or you only got a couple of years, and all of a sudden all the things, like I'm sitting here in my 3rd year in Arizona, I still haven't been to the Grand Canyon. Everyone in my family has, but I still haven't been there. I'm like, that's dumb, right? But there's so much to do around here, and I'm like, oh, I'll get to it. But that's my takeaway. I'm going to live as if I only have a short period of time to do the things, and that'll help with the motivation to get out there and do it. I'm feeling convicted about, gosh, I could definitely do some more quality time. I know my kids would love that.
Yeah, I think, I saw something on social media a week or so ago, and it said, nobody's ever going to remember how long you were at work except your kids. They will remember how much time you spent at work and not at the house.
And boy, do they do that.
Yeah.
And you're always like, what? Wait a
Now,
second.
we got to make a living. We got to work. I got that.
Yeah.
But when you have time for some quality time, you got to take advantage of it.
Yeah. Yeah. I'm definitely applying that from I mean, we've got a lot of good
and I
nuggets.
wasn't always the best at it. I mean, there were times when my wife would have to say, okay, don't you think you worked enough? Let's do something as a family. And again, you know, that honesty, you know, she'd be very honest when she understood that I'm a driven person. I want to be the best at whatever I do, and that I'm going to work extra hard to get there. But she reminded me that there's more to it than just work. There's the importance of raising good kids and spending time with her. She always reminds me there's a reason I'm married, and it's because I want to be with my husband. So
I love the example that illustrates that. She was holding you accountable to she knows that you want to live at this high standard, and she's like, hey, you know what? I think you need to take a break. You know, we need to do this. And when you have two people in a couple that are willing to do that, and I love you guys' example about just being, you know, it's not necessarily it's having the courage to speak up and have those uncomfortable conversations, that the honesty that you alluded to earlier, that you mentioned earlier. Sometimes being honest and you know, it's not easy. You know, there's fear there. There's it's hard to have those conversations. Feelings happen. You know, you have to process those. So and we're kind of wrapping up our time, but yeah, what else on that? Does that bring up any other nuggets?
So I think, you know, I think one of the things that you have to establish in your family, and my father was very much like this, and I think my wife and I were, standards and discipline. You know, children are children. They are going to do what you let them do. Yeah. If you hold them to a standard, if you establish a standard, hold them to it, and make them do good things, they will do good things. If you let them do bad things, they're going to do bad things. All people are like that, but children are especially like that. So again, I think you as the parent, you've got to figure out what you want your family to look like. What you want your children to grow up into, to become, and set those standards at a young age so they know what the expectation is. I knew what the expectations for me. I mean, I knew it. My father very rarely ever told me I couldn't do something. He'd always say, well, you can do that. He said, but here's the consequences. You decide if it's worth it or not. And a couple of times I made that decision, and it never was worth it, let me tell you. But let's learn lessons, because I think that's part of, you know, one of the things that I see is that parents aren't letting children learn from mistakes. Now, I'm not saying fail. I'm not a believer in failing, and I'm not saying let them do whatever they want to do, but don't do things for your children. Make them do things for themselves. Make decisions for themselves. Tell them, okay, here's your two decisions. Here's your two things that you can do. Neither one of them are going to be bad. I mean, these are the two ways you could do it. You figure out how you want to do it. Start developing that decision-making process in your children so that they are figuring out that they have to make decisions that are going to have consequences for themselves. Because I think one of the things I see as a recruiter here at the ROTC program is I'll get a phone call from a parent. He said, well, my son or daughter's interested in Army ROTC. And I said, so why isn't he or she calling me?
Right.
You're not doing them any favor. Make them do the things that they need to do to grow up and to learn from mistakes and to learn from their decision-making process. That's the only way they're going to learn.
Yeah, and you have a lot of credibility there. Being you've set records in the recruiting for where you're at, and the places you've been. So you're doing something right. The application of that is definitely paying off. I could hear somebody saying, "Well, I gotta take care of my kid," but pay attention.
Yeah. Well,
Folks
there's a
right here.
difference between taking care of your kid and not letting them do anything for themselves.
Right.
And I used to call them helicopter parents,
Mhm.
but they're way beyond helicopter parents anymore. They're lawnmower parents. They try to
Oh, that's good.
they try to remove every obstacle that could ever come before their children, and that isn't doing them any favor. They don't know how to overcome those things. The first time something doesn't go their way, they panic. They don't know what to do because they've never encountered it. They've never had to deal with a bad situation. So I think we're not doing those. We're not doing kids any favor when we do that for them.
Yeah, and you're probably seeing that after they come into the program. Are you observing that from your perspective?
Yeah, I am. Yeah,
man.
Not everyone. Not everyone. I mean, we got some great young women in, but there's a percentage that you can absolutely tell who those young men and women that their parents did everything for them. You can pick them out real quick.
Yeah, not doing them any favors. Wow, you got a book waiting to be written there as well. Parenting.
Well, I am going to write my second book when I retire from my day job here on 1 October. I'm going to write my second book, and I'm going to talk about what we're talking about here today. In my presentation, I call it secrets to success. We all know there's no secrets to success. There are things you can do to help improve your chances of being successful. And that's what I'm going to talk about. How to set a goal, how to accomplish a goal, how to develop some self-discipline, how to develop good habits, because we are creatures of habit. Anybody who tells you they're not a creature of habit is lying to you. Everybody is a creature of it. We do things the same way every single time, and that's okay. That's not a bad thing, as long as they're good habits. But that's where my next book's going to go. That is my other presentation that I give besides my leadership presentation, and I think that I've got some messages that I think certainly the younger generation needs to hear.
Yeah, and I don't know. I mean, and I think parents also. I don't know if it's too late for some parents, right? But if you're in your 20s or 30s and you're raising small kids, like, the parents need to hear that too. I want to have the how to not be a lawnmower parent podcast episode someday in the future.
I'd love to do that. And we probably could pull in a couple other people who have had to deal with that too.
Yeah. Okay. Well, I feel a little bit incomplete because there are so many great nuggets, but we'll have to do this again, maybe multiple times. Because
anytime you want,
things
Scott,
we barely
I'd love
touched.
to come back on. I'd love to come back on anytime you want.
Yes. So we definitely did a good job of covering those couple of things like that we can do. Start at your local, start inside, start in your family, start in your community, make a positive impact on people. A lot of ways to do that. Take the multiple routes to get your own coffee, have conversations on people's on their space, and some stuff in parenting, a lot of good stuff. Yeah, like I said, maybe each one of those we can dive deeper into at a later date, but great stuff. Before we wrap up, Oak, is there any last point that you feel compelled to get out there?
Yeah, I just think that you really got to look in the mirror. Eventually President Eisenhower said that anytime he had a problem or an issue, he would get up and he would walk a circle around his desk. And if he didn't find that problem or issue, he'd walk a bigger circle in the offices outside his. And if he didn't find it, he'd walk a bigger circle. But he started at his desk because he might be the problem. So I think you got to be honest with yourself. You got to look in the mirror and say, am I doing what I want my children to do when they're parents, when they're teenagers, when they're adults? And if the answer is no, then you gotta dig deep and figure out what you got to do to change, because it starts with us. Every single person, you got to be responsible for yourself before you can be responsible for somebody else.
Yeah, that's so good. A lot of what you've touched on today, it's just about having the maybe hard conversations. It's not complicated, but not necessarily easy. And sometimes that conversation is with your own self.
That's right. It's not easy. It's not easy to look in that mirror and not like what you see, and say, okay, how am I going to fix that? And sometimes that's the hardest conversation to have. Yeah. The rest of them get a little easier than that. But I think you got to be honest with yourself. If you're not doing what you think is good, and again, one of my favorite quotes: America is great because America is good. If America ever ceases to be good, America will cease to be great. And I think that is absolutely true. And I think we've gotten away from that, not just at the national level and the community level, in every profession, but I think at the local, at the individual level, we're not doing what we know is the right thing to do.
Yeah. Yeah. So if we want America to continue to be good, then the good people need to stand up and speak up and start holding things accountable.
And set the example.
Yeah.
Yep, absolutely.
Good stuff. All right. Well, you are all over the place. You have a website, you're on LinkedIn, Instagram, Twitter, Facebook, YouTube. And I'll put all of those links in the show note, but give people one spot. What would be if somebody's like, okay, I really want to check into, I want to get the book, I want to check into all the things that, I want to take a step in the right direction. What would you recommend they do if they're listening?
Yeah, so go to my website. On my website has my email, my phone number. It has links to all my social media. It has links to where to get my book, all that stuff. But it has my email, and I love talking to people. I love connecting with people, and certainly if you have a conference or an organization that's coming up and you need somebody to come talk, I would love to do that for you. But just give me a call or send me an email, and we'll figure out a time to link up and have a conversation. I love meeting new people.
And go ahead and say the website.
Yes, it's www.LTC Oak McCulloch MCCULLOCH.com.
Right. And we will have that as well as all the other social links in the show notes. Yeah. And as far as speaking, we had talked about that before. You're on the speaking circuit, you're speaking all the time, and you want to get your message out there. You have a fantastic message. So anybody who's listening who has a need for a speaker, get a hold of Oak here. And he will not let you down. He will not disappoint. Your audience will be happy with what they've heard, as you can tell today. Oak, I really appreciate you being on my show here on the Awaken Life podcast. Look forward to doing it again and staying connected with you. Thank you so much.
Oh, absolutely, Scott. Anytime you want me back, just let me know.
Thanks for listening to the Awakened Life podcast. I've been your host, Scott Landis. Hey, are you feeling overwhelmed and stressed out? It could be that you're out of balance or have a misalignment of your time and priorities. This month at Awaken Life Academy, we're featuring the Total Freedom Life Wheel exercise designed to help you uncover what might be off balance in your work, life, and other priorities. And then it helps you realign your priorities to your purpose. Check out the full training video and free download at wheel.awakenlife.com. That's wheel.awakenedlife.com for free access. Don't put this personal growth opportunity off. Go get it now and start to experience the freedom that balance can bring to your life. Go to wheel.awakenlife.com.